Before to discuss in detail how to manage and to execute procurement activities using SAP ERP, we need to discuss some key concepts that are essential to understanding how this process will work. In particular, we need to focus our attention on how the material are purchased, meaning describing the item categories, then how they impact financial accounting, so how their impact on financial activities is recorded, and we will deal with account determination. Then we will need to understand the material usability by distinguishing stock type and status, and finally, how we can classify the goods movement when materials are received, stored, shipped to customer, and so on. Let's start with item categories, because purchases are classified in different ways in ERP, and this way is not so much different to the one that we see in the introduction. For example, let's start with standard item. The standard item follow the typical supply process, so the steps that we already see. So creation of a purchasing requisition after user needs has been shown up, then this requisition is transformed in the creation and in sending a purchase order to the vendor. Then materials are received. Then when the materials are checked as okay, we will receive an invoice and we will pay the supplier. However, let's make the hypothesis that we don't deal with standard material, but we deal with material called on consignment. For material called on consignment, there is liability only when this material is withdrawn from stock, because before this the material is still property of the supplier. So we will pay the vendor only when we will use or we will sell the material on stock. So for this category of materials, the purchasing process won't see the invoice receipt step. So in this case, this phase is cancelled. So we just send the payment to the supplier when we take the material from the stock. Another case is third party order. In case of third party order, we are referring to items that the vendor ships directly to the customer. So the customer receives the goods directly from the vendor, and so there is no goods receipt. So this phase is not included, because after an order has been issued, materials has been sent directly to the final customer, and so there was just order invoice reception and payment after invoice verification and verification about materials delivery to final customer. Another case is the subcontracting case. Under subcontracting condition, the company sends material to a vendor, and the vendor uses these materials to create semi-finished products. So the company, the buyers, send material to the vendor, and the vendor uses this material provided by the buyer to realize finished or semi-finished product. Semi-finished product to be then delivered to the company. So in this case, the process is the same of the standard components, but we also have one more steps, which is shipping materials to the vendor, material that will be necessary to realize the product that will be then sent to the company. Then we have the case of stock transfer. We can have the case of stock transfer when no vendor is included, but simply stock transfer is the process where an organization uses the procurement process to obtain material from one plant to another within the same organization. So as the process takes place within a single organization, no invoice reception and payment will take place. It's just a transfer of materials from plant to plant. Last case instead is the one of not if goods are involved in the procurement process, but services are involved in the procurement process, like cleaning services, landscaping services, marketing services, and stuff like this. Of course, in this case, we won't have the phase of material reception because, I mean, we are dealing with something intangibles, so we don't have receiving materials, but instead, I mean, in order to verify that the service is okay, we should include, I mean, a mechanism or some rules to record the performance of the service received. I mean, what we usually have, or including companies, what we call a service sheet, where we evaluate the quality of the service that has been received, and then, I mean, the other phases are the same. The second object we want to deal with is account determination. I mean, business typically use the procurement process to purchase materials. I mean, purchase materials, and this material then is then stored in inventory until the production then will need them, or other office will need them. I mean, such materials are referred to as stock materials. So we have stock that is there in order to be used in case of need. However, we saw when we deal with accounting information and accounting activities that the general ledger contains multiple inventory accounts, such as raw materials, such as trading goods, such as finished goods, such as semi-finished goods, and so on. So there is the need to make the ERP system understand which of these inventory accounts must be updated when, I mean, purchasing process is in place and materials has been received. For stock materials, for which a material master must be defined, I mean, there is the process of account determination. So for stock material where a material master exists, there is the process of account determination. So the process whereby the system determines which general ledger accounts needs to be used in order to register the arrival of this type of material. And I mean, it's automatic. It's an automatic process because I mean, as we will see that in the simulation, but according to the data contained in the material cluster, in the material master, we have a specific field which is named valuation class, and I mean, according to the valuation class, the system will be immediately able to recognize which general ledger accounts should be used for the case. Of course, not only direct material exists, like raw material, like semi-finished product, trading goods, and stuff like this, but also indirect materials are present in a company. For example, if you remember, we talk about MRO, maintenance, repairs, and operation purchasing, and I mean, this type of indirect materials can be consumed by different entities. So we need what we call an account assignment object. An account assignment object identifies the bearer of the cost of the purchase, and I mean, which then become the entity for which the material were purchased. For example, here you see this example. Let's imagine that I mean, the marketing department required the purchasing of office supply. So it means that the marketing department will be the owner of this type of request, meaning that this request will debit a consumption account such as the supply expense account in the general ledger, which need to be charged to the marketing department, which is what we call the cost center of this consumption. Why we need to do that? Because if you recall, from a managerial accounting perspective, a cost center is a cost object which will be used to accumulate costs for a department and then calculate the marginality and the profitability of the company. Then, we should also introduce the concept of account assignment categories, because companies also use the purchasing process not just to buy direct materials or indirect material, but generally speaking, they purchase goods and services for different purposes. For example, they can, acquire also assets such as cars, such as plant, in order to support different processes like production, fulfillment, enterprise asset management, and stuff like this. So, in order to understand which are the specific accounting data that are needed for the different type of purchasing, we need to introduce what we call the account assignment category. Let's say, the account assignment object to be charged and the general ledger account that are required for each category. So each category is assigned to a specific account assignment object and a link to the general ledger account to be charged. Which are the most common use account assignment categories related to purchasing? We have assets. So company uses this category when it acquires a fixed asset such as cars, such as land, building, plant, and so on. Order. A company uses this category when they purchase materials for different type of order. And when a company purchases materials for an order, stuff like order number and the general ledger account number need to be included in the purchase order. Cost center. So when a company purchasing materials, so a type of supplies to be consumed, then the purchase order must include both the cost center to be charged and the appropriate general ledger expense to be addressed. So must include the center where the costs need to be charged, but also the appropriate general ledger expense account to be charged of this purchasing. Sales order. So when the purchase is associated with a specific sale order, same of purchase order, we need to include the sales order number and the general ledger account number in order to register this type of purchasing, or can be a project. So company use this category when the purchase is related to a project, and so we need to include the project number and the general ledger account number to be charged of this project procurement need. Another key object of purchasing is the stock type, because stock of materials can be classified into different stock type or status that determine the usability of materials. So according to the status, the company can use the materials in different way and in different processes. Let's see which type of categories can be associated to the stock types. First of all, materials can be classified as having unrestricted use, and namely that they can be used they can be used in any manner that management feels would benefit the enterprise. So if they are unrestricted use, only certain condition will apply it. So for example, they can be consumed internally to produce other products or externally to meet customer demand. In contrast, materials that are defined as in quality inspection, of course, they cannot be used because they are stacked somewhere else, somewhere in the plant or in the production system, because they are they are being checked for sampling or for scrap. So I mean, they are actually stacked some way in the production process. A company usually use the quality inspection status when the goods received from a vendor I mean needs to undertake inspection before being released for consumption. When we say block status for stock, it means that materials is damaged or unusable for some reason, so it cannot be used for production, or because the vendor have delivered the wrong quality or the wrong variant of material of goods. Finally, we see that we have the in-transit variant of the purchasing process, and when materials are being moved from one plant to another, we define it stock in transit. So just to highlight that the stock is in delivery from one location to another. Another key object is the goods movement, because a process step that results in a change in stock status results in goods movement. When there is a transition from one status to another, it means that goods are moving. So goods movement is associated with receiving materials from a vendor, shipping them to a customer, or I mean moving from a location to another. And I mean there are different types of goods movement. The first one is goods receipt. Goods receipts simply records the receipt of material into storage, which results in an increase in inventory quantity. So I received some materials from vendor. The stock increase, which is, the contrary of good issue, because good issue is used when materials are removed from storage, for example, to be sold to the final customer or to be used for production. So in this case, the inventory is reduced. So usually it happens when there is a shipment of materials to a customer, when they are being used for internal consumption, or materials are designated for sampling or just checked with quality and they become scrap. Then we have the stock transfer. The stock transfer is used to move goods from one location to another within the organization. And materials can be transferred between storage locations, between plants within the same company codes, or also between plants across company codes. Finally, we have transfer posting. And company use transfer posting to change material status or type. For example, we can use transfer posting to redefine a materials from in-quality inspection status to unrestricted usage for the production process. So it is just like a transition state in order to make the change of material status feasible. Every time we have a good movement, a relative material document is created, and also a financial accounting document is created if the movement results in change in valuation of the stock. And a material document records data related to goods movement, such as the receipt of goods from vendor. As we see in this picture, we see that the material document has essentially two great parts. One is the header, and the other one is more items or detail. The header contains data such as the date, the name of the person who created the document, the source of the document, and the process step or transaction that were used to create this type of document. The detail items instead quantify the quantity of materials involved, the location, the movement type used, and also other relevant data that depend on the process, like vendor, customer, and stuff like this.